I haven't done a tag video in a while. It is July, midway through the year, so let's do the mid-year check-in tag. Why not? Mid-year reading check-in tag. I don't know if I got that right in the introduction, but I tried it like 8 times and I'm sick of continuing to do it. So there it is. That's what it's actually called. The mid-year reading check-in book tag. Why is that so hard for me to remember? That's what I'm doing today. It's been a long time since I did a tag. I saw this video by Jashana, who the original video is like 2023, and I guess she's done it like 2 years in a row. I thought it was very interesting, had some good questions, and so I thought I'll do that tag and see what the answers are. So I've watched her video, but other than that, I haven't really prepared for this, and so I just pulled up the actual questions, and I have my Goodreads log, and we'll see if I can answer these questions in a somewhat coherent way without blathering too much. Let's get started. Question 1. What's the best book you've read so far this year? Now, my initial gut is that is going to be... date read. I see. So this is interesting. I'm looking at my Goodreads, and I actually don't have a single 5-star review from this year for a book. I have a couple 4-stars, and so I will just go with... kind of going back and forth on 1 or 2. Let's go with Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is a really well-known fantasy series, obviously, and I read the first 3 books, kind of the first trilogy, and there's like 4 more after that. And I honestly was not sure what to expect from these books. I knew vaguely about them, but a lot of people said Pierce Brown wasn't as sort of beautiful a writer in the prose department, and that kind of took me away from it. And also sci-fi I'm just not as into, but I had a friend who constantly asked me to do it, and I finally read it, and it's really, really good. It's not perfect. I don't have it as a 5-star read, but as a 4-star read, it is kinetic. It is so fast. You have a little bit of a breath at the beginning while you're learning about this world and Mars, where our main character lives, and then just it is a downhill. It actually reminds me a lot of when you're reading Hunger Games, where like you're reading the beginning, and it's like, okay, so Katniss is here or whatever, and the Hunger Games start, and it's just like boom, everything goes. Red Rising is the same. It actually has some similar themes, particularly about like heightening class differences in our real world, using sci-fi to sort of amplify that. I think it's really good. Great read. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. If you're wondering, the other book I was thinking about is Mort by Terry Pratchett. It's the first Discworld book I read, and I really liked it. Since that wasn't the official answer, that can be an answer for another question. So number 2, what's the most disappointing book you've read so far this year? This is so interesting because so much of my reading has been history books and not fantasy books. But I guess if I'm being honest, the most disappointing book that I've read this year is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. So I'd already read this book. I read it 8 years ago, I think, or 7 years ago, before I was ever on BookTube, because so many people talk about the First Law trilogy and Joe Abercrombie generally. And I remember reading that trilogy and being like, yeah, it's good, it's not great. And through the years, as the praise built, especially for his second trilogy of books, The Age of Madness, more and more I was like, I must have just missed something. I want to be a part of this group love. I mean, I think this year in r/fantasy's like top novels, it was like number 4 or something like that, super high. And I was like, I just want to get on this. Actually, kind of how I felt about Stormlight Archive for a while before I reread those and just like, they're not for me. And so I reread The Blade Itself, and for me, it is good. Obviously, Joe Abercrombie is a good writer, especially because not a lot happens in that book. It's really just the perspectives are so interesting, and his writing of action is really, really good. You have a sense of the geography in an action scene that is quite unlike a lot of other authors. But at the end of the day, I did not enjoy any of the characters, and I felt like while they were distinct, they all had like the same blueprint of like either world weary or prideful know-it-all or some combination thereof. I didn't want to spend a lot of time with them, so I read this first one again, and I was like, you know what, I remember most of this. I'm just going to read summaries of the second 2 books, Last Argument of Kings and Before They Are Hanged, and I'm just going to run right into the standalones and then hopefully get to the Age of Madness. Because I do think those are the first lot trilogy are the first books he published. There's a lot of room to grow, and I have a lot of people I respect who say the second one is even better than the first in many ways. And so I'm interested in that. So I was disappointed with Best Served Cold. No, The Blade itself. I am very interested in still getting to that second trilogy. So I'll be picking up, what is the next? The Heroes, I think, is the next standalone, Red Country, and then I can jump into Age of Madness. But very disappointed by The Blade itself. Probably need to go faster. Okay, what's the best book recommendation you have received this year? Oh, that's an interesting question. Book recommendation. I mean, I guess I already used it, but the honest answer, I've said it multiple times, is Red Rising by Pierce Brown, especially because I had one friend, not just that like he recommended it to me, but he kind of hounded me to read it, and I'm glad he did. So shout out, thanks Sam, really worth the read. Am I allowed to use? I haven't read as many books, so I'm gonna repeat answers. I'm just gonna make my own rules. What was your first DNF of the year so far? I don't normally keep my DNFs in my logs, so I don't think I've technically like DNF'd everything. I did. Does that count? Yeah. This is kind of silly, but The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. I've obviously read it before, and I was going to read it again this summer. Kind of picked it up, and I was like, not feeling it. Not because it's bad, it just wasn't the right spot. So I guess that's technically a DNF. Not really interesting, because I know normally when we talk about DNFs, we want to talk about how bad they are, but that just wasn't it. A new release from this year that you've read and your thoughts on it. It's over there, and I don't want to go get it, but Written on the Dark by Guy Gavriel Kay. I've not finished it as I am recording this right now, but the first 150 pages are excellent. Kay is so good about quickly building worlds and characters that you have so much like stake in all of a sudden. Again, I've only read 150 pages, and there's already like 3 or 4 characters that I'm like, those are my people. I want them to do well. So I imagine I'll really love that. Even if it doesn't stick the landing, it is by far my favorite new release I've read this year. A book that came out in the first half of the year that you want to read, and a book coming out in the second half of the year that you are anticipating. So a book that came out in the first half. Let's use Google. Fantasy books came out this year. I'm just going to see. None of these. Don't know any of these. Maybe I'll just cheat and say Written on the Dark since I haven't read it. I'll just say that. And then I have a real easy answer for the second half of the year, which is No Life Forsaken, which is the second book in the Tales of Witness by Steven Erikson, sort of the follow-up series from Book of the Fallen. The first book is The God Is Not Willing, which was great. I have a review of it. I read it 3 years ago, and I'm rereading it this month in July, and I will have a live discussion with Rhythma at Ridbook to talk about that book, and we're reading it together because I am so excited to be reading it. Certainly that's what I'm most excited about in the second half of the year. What's the most beautiful book you've added to your collection, or a beautiful book you'd like to own? Ooh, what have I added to my collection? So if you don't know out there, my wife and I run a used bookstore, so a lot of the new books I get are because like cool books are donated, and I kind of swipe it before they go on the shelves. But the honest answer... This is interesting. I don't think people are going to think this is the most beautiful, but looking at it makes me happy. Here we go. The Power Broker by Robert Caro. This is a great history book. I might actually make a review of this coming up. I listened to the audiobook from this book primarily, but I wanted the book so bad because it is such an excellent nonfiction work. Robert Moses is a public servant in New York in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and in many ways sort of ran his own kingdom in New York and did many good things for folks, but eventually this love for power really leads him to start manipulating New York City in a bad way, particularly around certain people groups that he doesn't think should be living in New York City. And I don't want to say too much because I have a full review on this. But now, obviously, this is not the most beautiful cover, although I do like this as kind of a throwback. But just this is such a big, simple book. These are the books that I leave on my bookshelf because I can see them clearly. And I remember the experience of reading them. And it just gives me so much joy. Like, honestly, just the simplicity of this spine sitting on my shelf I find so much joy with that this is where my head went. What genre have you read the most from this year? Now, normally this would be hands down fantasy or sci-fi, depending on the year. But the answer is very obvious if you look at my Goodreads, and that is historical nonfiction. I've been reading biographies of all of the presidents, and I've read biographies of the first 5 presidents. So Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe. So that is clearly the majority of my works because I haven't read it as much as some other booktubers. I'm starting to get a little bit more momentum in the fantasy side of things, but at this point in this mid-year, it is historical nonfiction biography by a mile. Do you feel your reading tastes have changed or shifted at all this year? A new trope or favorite theme? This is still to be seen, but as I mentioned, I read my first Discworld book, Mort, by Terry Pratchett, and that gave me an interest into reading maybe more in the classical, like, comedy, sci-fi fantasy. Primarily, I want to read more Discworld. I'm reading my 3rd one right now, and it's sort of rebounding. The first one I read was Mort, which I loved. Then I read Reaper Man, which I did not like so much, and now I'm reading the 3rd in the Death series, which is called Soul Music, which I'm enjoying quite a lot. I haven't finished it, but I'm enjoying it a lot now. And it also reminded me that I have not read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I want to get. It's such a classic, I just haven't read it. Primarily because I haven't normally been interested in sort of the more comedic sides of both sci-fi fantasy. And my love for these Discworld books makes me think maybe I should rethink that. So if you know any besides kind of those big ones, Discworld and Hitchhiker's Guide, let me know in the comments. Have you set any bookish goals for yourself this year, and how are they going? I actually haven't, because as many of you know, my other job is a politician, and this is a very busy year, so I thought I was not going to read very much, which is true through the first 5 months, but now in June I've kind of animated my reading style. So maybe I should set a goal for the end of the year, but maybe I'll do that in 2026, but I've never really been in it for the stats as much as like wanting to get to as many stories as possible, which in my mind is different. What book format have you been gravitating towards this year? So I guess that's ebook, physical media, or obviously like a Kindle or ebook or something. The honest answer is audiobook, because again, I have a commute to work that's about an hour and 15 minutes. I don't have to drive it every day, but that gives me a lot of time for audiobooks in the car. I also do listen to a lot of podcasts, but that's where a lot of my books have been, especially those presidential biographies, like I said. Most of them I've read via audiobook, as well as The Blade itself, which I just mentioned, a couple of other things. I also have a new gym plan that has me go 5 days out of the week instead of every other day. So I've had a lot more time to listen to stuff. But I can't work out and listen to an audiobook. That's not an interesting question. Can you work out and listen to an audiobook? I find that I can't focus on both things. So I used to do a podcast that I can kind of go in and out with while I'm working out. But that means I have less podcasts to listen to, and other times, like in the car, so I listen to a lot more audiobooks. Anyway, I went way too deep there. Finally, a book you've read so far this year that you feel embodies the vibe of your reading year. That would honestly have to be Tim McGrath's biography on James Monroe, A Life. Monroe of the First 5 Presidents is the one that I knew the least about, and I was completely taken with his story. McGrath is both comprehensive, but in a digestible way. It's a huge book, but it's not as huge as it could be, and it's not like dry academic, site-heavy discussions. It's still not the heights of like a Robert Caro or John Meacham or some others that are like really easy to jump in and read, but still very, very good. And like I said, I learned a lot about Monroe, and I said I've read a lot of biography and historical biography this year, particularly of presidents. So that's probably my year. That's maybe boring for this channel, but that's the honest answer. All right, that is the mid-year reading check-in book tag. Man, that is just so difficult to say all at once, but I had a fun time. If you get this tag and like it, please feel free to make your own video. Thank you, Joshana, for making your video and showing me this tag. A lot of fun. Keep on reading. First in, last out.